Diphyllobothrium is the largest tapeworm to infect human beings that can grow up to 30 feet lengthwise. It is also known as the fish or broad tapeworm. This can infect humans through eating undercooked or raw fish such as salmon, trout, perch, walleye pike, and other freshwater species. Infections can also occur from consuming imported fish originating from the northern hemisphere, where Diphyllobothrium are transported and consumed. For the life cycle of Diphyllobothrium latum, it starts as an egg where it starts to mature or embryonate for approximately 18 to 20 days in the water. It then yields oncospheres and forms into a corycidia over time. A freshwater crustacean, usually a cocod, ingests the larvae and it develops into a procercoid larvae. A second intermediate host ingests the infected crustacean such as a small freshwater fish. The procercoid larvae develops into plerosarcoid larvae or sparginum, which is the infective stage for humans, but it does not usually infect humans because humans barely eat raw freshwater meat. The freshwater fish are ingested by larger species such as trout or walleye pike. Sparginum migrates to the flesh of the fish, in which humans typically eat undercooked or raw. Following ingestion of the infected freshwater fish, the sparginum develops into an immature then mature adult tapeworm residing in the small intestine by attaching to the mucosa with two bilateral grooves bothyra of their skull legs. Growth reaches over 10 meters with 3,000 proglottids. Immature eggs are passed in the feces through the proglottids. They appear in the feces 5 to 6 weeks after infection. Then the cycle repeats. Most infections of the Diphyllobothrium latum is surprisingly asymptomatic, but when symptoms manifest, these include abdominal discomfort, diarrhea, vomiting, and weight loss. This also includes malnutrition, vitamin B12 deficiency in rare cases, leading to pernicious anemia. Tapeworms are also found in stools. Complications include intestinal obstructions and gallbladder diseases such as cholecystitis, cholangitis. For diagnosis, a microscopic investigation of stool to determine the specific tapeworm is done. Examination of the proglottids are passed in the stool. Blood tests identifying antibodies against the cestode organ test to determine the functional capability of an organ due to infection such as the gallbladder or in the intestines. For the treatment, removal of adult tapeworm are much easier than managing a larvae infection. Medications include praziquantel and niclosamide are often used. If tapeworms reach the brain, they may need surgical removal with administration of highly toxic effective drugs. They also take laxative to easily excrete tapeworm through stools. For prevention, it is best to always wash the food before cooking. Avoid eating raw or undercooked fish. The FDA recommends the following to kill parasites, such as cooking the fish adequately, having internal temperature of around 63 degrees Celsius and freezing until solid of negative 20 degrees Celsius for 24 hours or 7 days. From 2008 to 2012, there have been 4 people who have been diagnosed with Diphyllobothrium latum infection. In February 12, a young Korean man visited for a colonoscopy to rule out his lower abdominal discomfort. They found a mobile, white segments of tapeworm found in this sigmoid colon and was taken out with forceps. It was 40 cm long and the patient was in need for light sedative after viewing a white worm taken off from his abdomen. Has no health problems, no past history of any disease, but frequently ate trout and raw salmon. Laboratory findings showed D. latum, and he was treated with praziquantel.
Echinococcus granulosus causes a zoonotic disease called cystic echinococcosis, also known as hydatid disease or hydatidiosis during infection of its larval stage. It is caused by parasites, specifically tapeworms or cestodes in the genus Echinococcus. Its transmission commonly affects people associated with raising sheep and working dogs because of its role of the parasite's intermediate host. Transmission to humans are through ingestion of contaminated food, water, soil, or direct contact with the infected host such as animals that contain parasite eggs of the bacteria. The bacteria resides in the small bowel of definitive hosts such as dogs and other canids. Eggs of mature proglottids called gravid proglottids will release eggs. The eggs are then transmitted in the feces, and once ingested by a suitable intermediate host, hatching of the egg will take place in the small bowel and will release an oncosphere, which is the larval form of the tapeworm. It then infiltrates the intestinal wall and spreads through the circulatory system, infecting various organs, especially the liver and the lungs. The organs infected with the oncosphere gradually develops an enlarging cyst that produces protozoolises, which are parasite larvae that mature into adult worms, and daughter cysts that fill the cyst interior. After ingestion, the protozoolises evert, attach to the intestinal mucosa, and develop into adult stages 1 in 32 to 80 days. Human infection with E. granulosus leads to the formation of hyadated cysts commonly found in the liver and lungs. It is less frequently found in the bones, kidneys, spleen, muscles, CNS, and the eyes. The infection can remain asymptomatic for many years until it triggers a clinical sign when the cyst grows. Signs depend on where the hyadated cyst is located and how much pressure is put on the surrounding tissues. For hyadatids occurring in the liver, it may manifest abdominal pain, nausea, and vomiting in infected host. For the lungs, it may manifest chest pain, shortness of breath, and chronic cough. And nonspecific signs of the infection are anorexia, weight loss, and weakness. For the diagnosis of the disease, ultrasonography imaging technique is used in humans. This technique is usually complemented or validated by CT scan or MRI scans. For the treatment, surgery remains as the most effective treatment that can lead to complete cure. Other effective treatments aside from surgery are cyst puncture, PAIR, which stands for percutaneous aspiration, injection of chemicals, and respiration, and chemotherapy by limiting the areas where dogs roam and by preventing them to consume meat infected with cyst. Also, refrain from consuming any food or drink that can be contaminated with fecal matter. Practice proper hand washing with soap and water all the time, especially before and after handling dogs and food. Latest public health report on Echinococcus granulosus. According to a journal article about foodborne parasitic zoonosis in the Philippines, parasites such as echinococcosis and hyatidosis are mostly common in other parts of Asia. Only few reports were made in the Philippines. One of the cases reported in the Philippines was recorded in Los Baños, Laguna, which was an echinococcus cyst found in the heart of cattle and in the lungs of a water buffalo in Manila. In 1947, only one case of Echinococcus granulosus infection of a dog was reported in the Tubangi, Philippines, while 2 local cases of human hyatidosis in the lungs were reported.
So next we'll talk about Tinea saginata, which is also known as beef tapeworm. This is an intestinal parasitic infection which is distributed worldwide, where cattle are the intermediate host and we humans are the definitive host. One of the most common cause of this infection is by consuming infected cow which are poorly cooked, such as raw or undercooked, and sometimes poor human sanitation and poor meat inspection can be part of it. The life cycle of T. saginatus starts when the egg or gravid proglottid enters the environment. Proglottid is basically a segment of a body of a tapeworm which contains both female and male reproductive system, which means proglottid can reproduce asexually. So the eggs can enter the cattle when cattle eats an infected grass. As the egg enters the intestine of cattle, it will hatch and become oncosphere, which is the larval form of a tapeworm, and they will start penetrating the intestinal wall and move around into the muscles of cattle. When these oncospheres develop into cysticercus, they are now infective, meaning when humans consume this infected cattle, which is not properly cooked,
Those cysticercus will infect humans' intestine and develop into full adult tapeworm within 2 months. They can survive inside the human body for several years, and adult tapeworm can attach to small intestine by their scolex. The length of this tapeworm is usually 5 meters or less, but can grow up to 20 meters. Adult tapeworm produce proglottids, which get matured and graved. Those proglottids will mitigate to anus area and will be passed into stool, and it will be released back into the environment again by humans' feces, and the cycle begins again. Most of the time, this infection is asymptomatic. However, heavy infection can often result to diarrhea, weakness, weight loss, nausea, and even tapeworms found in the stool. In order to diagnose this infection, scientists use microscopic examination, which they take a sample from the stool to check if there is any presence of proglottids or eggs. Usually, this infection can be treated by using praziquantel and niclosamide. And in order to prevent this infection, it is very important to follow proper cooking of the beef and proper sanitation, which includes hand washing. In 1985, research have shown that T. saginata has been more common infection than T. solium, which can be found in the pork. However, T. saginata is not a common infection anymore. In 1976, 2 villages on Leyte Island had endemic T. saginata infection. However, any of the intermediate hosts, such as cattle and water buffalo, was not infected by T. saginata. In fact, local village people did not eat beef often. Instead, they regularly ate raw or undercooked pork. It does appear that both T. saginata and T. solium were present in that area. Scientists were not able to find the life cycle of T. saginata in that village and concluded it as unknown.